So I got a really important question. Before we dig into the content today for cold calling, this is probably the most important question I'm going to ask today. I'd love to hear in the chat. What was your favorite childhood breakfast? Was there anything you ate as a kid that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that was like the most unhealthy shit ever? Is there anything like that that you used to eat? Yeah, Pop-Tarts was a big one for me. Let me know in the chat. We'll have a little bit of fun before we get started and kill the music here in a second. Captain Crunch. So Captain Crunch, I'm big on the peanut butter Captain Crunch. That's something I'm a big fan of. This is hilarious. Golden Grams, Fruit Loops, bologna sandwiches for breakfast? Interesting. Bread dipped in chocolate milk, Karina. That's a healthy breakfast there. Cold pizza, I've done that a lot of times in my day, Tyler. You guys are awesome. All right, I got one other question before we dig in here, and this will help me kind of make sure to customize the content a little bit for you guys. What is your biggest challenge when it comes to cold calling? Like, what do you want to get most away from the training that we're doing today? Okay. Yeah, so we got gatekeepers, phone numbers, fear of rejection. Yeah, confidence is a big one. Yeah, not taking it personally, getting them to talk, engaging the prospect. Yeah, keep it coming, you guys. This is really helpful. So getting the prospect to talk, value props, specific openers. We're definitely going to talk about all that stuff. Yeah. So motivation and call reluctance, I'm seeing a lot. Cool. Confidence I'm seeing. So yeah, so I'm hearing a lot around the pitch too. Pitch and value prop. Yeah, people hanging out. So dealing with not interested. So we're definitely going to talk about that. I'm loving the engagement, you guys. This is awesome. How to stay organized. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and kill the music here. Exit out of that, and we're going to dig in. This is really awesome, you guys. I'm super excited to dig into this topic because cold calling, I feel like, is one of the most underrated prospecting tools out there, the phone. And a lot of times what I find in the companies that we work with is that people are afraid to pick up the phone. Call reluctance is something that reps deal with at companies. The biggest, most successful companies in the world deal with call reluctance, and their reps down to like your startups and your individual solo business owners. And what we're going to dig into today is primarily cold calling. So some of you guys had asked around stuff that's more workflow related or sequence related. I'm not going to cover that today, but I'm happy to share resources with you that will help. But we're going to primarily focus on cold calling. And the big things that I hear with cold calling are mostly the things that you shared. There's this kind of feeling that we get. I don't know if you remember when you were a little kid and you wanted to talk to the adults, but you were not cool enough, right? You were worried about not having something adult like to say to, or talking about work or family or whatever it might be. And we kind of get this feeling sometimes when we're reaching out to a prospect, like, why would they want to listen to me? Why would this person who's been doing their job for 10, 20, 30 years, they're much older than me, much more experienced, why would they want to listen to me? This is also what I heard from you guys here too. Another common thing that I hear holding people back is, well, what if they ask me a question I don't know the answer to, right? And I feel put on the spot, much like you would at like an open mic. I used to do stand-up comedy for about 1.5 years. Don't worry, I was not good. I was not a Kevin Hart or anything like that, obviously. But open mics, the audience can do stuff that kind of puts you on the spot where you got to react in the moment. That can be very scary, in a cold call when we have to react in the moment. And then what I saw a lot of in here, a lot of call reluctance comes from rejection. I think that's probably the biggest fear that people have with making cold calls. And I think that they don't have any stats around this, but I think that people have a bigger fear of making cold calls than they do of public speaking. I know that people always talk about public speaking, but making cold calls and getting rejected is something that people do not like. And today I'm not going to talk with you to you, by the way, about how to like rejection. I don't think that you could ever like getting rejected. Like, we're human beings here. And by the way, I'm not going to talk to you about how you can like cold calling either. I don't think that you have to like it. I think you just have to accept that it's a part of your job. It's a tool that works. And how can we optimize it and do well at it? And the big things that I want to give to you today is, how can we relax a little bit? No different than like on vacation. How can we sit back and relax a little bit when we're making these calls and know that you bring value, right? So I'm going to talk about the value that you bring and the value that you can share with prospects when you're cold calling. I'm going to talk a lot about what to say in your cold calls. That's another thing that I hear holding people back is, well, when I make a call, I don't really know what to say when the person picks up, so I kind of wing it every time. And that creates a lot of call reluctance. And ultimately, like Beyonce or any other person that you've seen perform on stage before, what I want to share with you is how you can be more confident, how you bring more confidence into the calls, because your tonality and the confidence is probably 75% of whether or not someone will want to continue talking with you. So we're going to talk about 3 key principles today. I'm going to talk about how to get your mindset right. We're going to talk about how to pattern interrupt. So how to do a good intro, how to be different from what the prospect normally experiences, so we can interrupt the normal pattern that they go through when they pick up the phone and talk to someone that they don't know. And then we're also going to talk about how you can have a plan and use a talk track, and I have an example of something that I can show you. And then at the end, we're going to talk about how to handle common objections as well. So just a couple things here in Zoom, because there's quite a bit of you on this call. If you could, what would really help me out is if you have a specific question about something I'm covering, please use the Q&A button in Zoom. So there's a Q&A button there at the very bottom. Try to avoid putting the questions that are specific to you into the chat, because I might miss them, because there's a lot of people chatting in here. So let me know in the Q&A box if you have a specific question that you want answered. I'll try to get to as many of those as I can. So let's dig in. So what you might be thinking is, well, Jason, I'm here on a cold calling webinar, but I've heard that cold calling is dead. Is this something that I should still be doing? Like, why not create content on LinkedIn, or become an influencer, or send a bunch of emails, or use LinkedIn sequences, or whatever it may be? And what I want to really start with is, what our prospects think about cold calling is actually way more important than what we salespeople think. So you might see people like me, or sales leaders, or people like that on LinkedIn saying that cold calling is dead, and instead you should be doing this. You should be social selling. And the fact of the matter is that prospects don't, like, I'm not going to tell you that prospects are sitting around waiting for you to call them. Like that's not happening. That's not what I'm saying. But cold calling does work. Like, statistically, and you can look this up, the Rain Group did a big study on this, and 82% of B2B buyers said they accepted meetings from salespeople who reached out to them in the last 12 months. Obviously, they approached those cold calls in a really good, structured way that was about the prospect, which I'm going to share with you today. But they also found that 69% of buyers accepted cold calls from new providers. So people that already had a solution in place, they accepted calls. A little over 2/3 of them accepted cold calls from new providers, given that the timing was relevant. So cold calling, I'm going to focus specifically on that today, but I want to remind you that cold calling works best when combined with multi-channel sequences that include email and social. So what I'm not suggesting today is that you just make calls. This should be combined with what you're doing on email and social. And at the very end, I'm going to save about 5 minutes or so. We do have a prospecting bootcamp starting, but I'm going to give you a chance. For anyone that doesn't want to hear about that, I'm going to give you a chance to hop off, but I will make a quick announcement about a bootcamp that we're starting next week, actually, if you want some more details. So make sure to stick around to the end for that. Cool. All right, let me share my other screen here, and we're going to dig in to the content. Okay, so what I want to work with you on, and this is kind of giving you a taste of like how we coach and train. Actually, I like to get like pretty tactical and really just kind of pen to the paper, kind of thing. So what I want to talk about first is, like, in order to go from reluctant to confident with our cold calls, we need to do some things around our mindset. So the mindset that we need to approach is one of curiosity. And when I say curiosity, what I'm saying is if you can approach this conversation and this cold call with, I wonder if this prospect is having a problem that I can help them with. I wonder what they might be running across that's getting in the way of their priorities right now. I wonder how I might be able to help. And Jody, yes, this is being recorded. You asked in the chat, and I'll send it out to you guys afterwards if you want the live recording. But if we can approach the cold call from a place of curiosity and make it about them instead of making it about us, that is going to be the mindset that is really the foundation for the entire prospecting approach, right? Because our goal, let me actually know in the chat, what is our goal from a cold call? What are we trying to accomplish in a cold call? Let me know in the chat. What are we trying to accomplish? Where are we trying to get? We have this mindset of curiosity. Yeah, so a lot of people are saying finding pain, setting a meeting, setting up a conversation to see if this is relevant. Okay, and this is where I want to kind of pause and stop you here. The goal of a cold call is simply to start a conversation. The goal is actually not to get a meeting. A meeting could happen if the person is qualified and they want to chat and all this other stuff, but you know what? You can't get a meeting unless you start a conversation. So what I want you to do is just ease up on the anxiety and cut yourself a break here. And don't put so much pressure on yourself to get a meeting from everyone that you call or everyone that you talk to that picks up. Make the goal just to start a conversation and lead with curiosity. So let's talk a little bit more about how to do this. If we can change our mindset around, I need to get a meeting, which is going to sound very desperate to the prospect too. You know what, let me see if I can start a conversation with Jason. And let me see if I can be a little curious about how Jason might be handling certain things that I might be able to help him with. It's going to take care of a lot of your tonality issues as well. So there's 3 stages. So I'm going to give you the 10,000 foot view of the content, and then we're going to drill into some of the areas that you guys want to focus on. So there's a prep stage, there's dealing with assistance, and then there's what do we do when we get the main point of contact on the phone. So there's a couple really key important things that we need to do when we're preparing. So one is we need to research the prospect. So we need to find a trigger, we need to find a reason to reach out to them, right? Something we can use to start the conversation with. One thing that I like to talk about as well, I call this concept drink the company Kool-Aid. And the reason why I say this is how prepared are you with your company's case studies, your testimonials? If you sell software, maybe the G2 reviews, the software reviews, whatever it might be. One of the things that you can do to prepare is every day what I would do is spend a couple minutes looking at all of the company collateral that talks about how good of a job you guys do for your customers. It's going to do a lot for your confidence, right? And it's also going to give you relatable stories. So when someone says, you know, actually, I am having this problem where, you know, if I'm using myself as an example, and I'm cold calling, well, I do have this problem where our reps spend too much time on personalization and they aren't hitting their activity targets. I can be like, well, actually, another company we're working with, so-and-so was sharing that they had the same exact problem. And one of the ways they fixed it was doing this, right? So drink the company Kool-Aid. And then the last part is, how could we get in the zone? So there's a couple things that I recommend that you could do. One is to change your physical state. So I don't know if you guys can tell or not, but I'm standing up right now. So when I do a webinar like this, I want to be in the same mode that I would be in if I was on stage talking in front of a bunch of people. So one of the things that I find really handy, and I look like a maniac when I'm here in my office making calls, because I still make cold calls, is to change my physical state. So instead of sitting, why don't you stand up? Instead of making them in this room, make them in a different part of the room. Make them from your kitchen. Make them outside if you're standing outside and it's not too cold. Like, how can I change my physical state to get in the zone? The other thing that you can do too is move. So one of the things that I find really handy, especially if I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling some call reluctance, because I still feel call reluctance too when I go to make these calls, is go outside and go on a 5-minute walk beforehand. Right? How can I get my blood flowing, get outside, get some sunshine, hopefully, if it's sunny outside? How can I move and get my heart rate up to ease some of that anxiety? There's a couple other things you can do too. Like I put on music at the beginning of this. Do you got a favorite song? Is there something that you can use to kind of pump yourself up and remind you that all this research that you've been doing on how you guys help companies, that, hey, you guys do a really good job, right? So that's going to give you curiosity, and it's also going to help you with this next piece, which is really important, is conviction. Like, this part here is going to give you the confidence that, you know what, it doesn't matter what this person says. And Paul says, Rocky soundtrack, right? So maybe you're listening to Eye of the Tiger or whatever it might be. Nadine says, do you advise that we read from our file or memorize what we will be discussing? Yeah, totally. I think you should memorize the opening line of your cold call, and from there you can use a talk track, which I'll show you. So the thing that's going to connect the prep that you do with the assistants is your data. So a couple of you had asked about call data. I like using two different tools. One is called Apollo.io, and the other is called LeadIQ. Oops, LeadIQ. So if you need phone numbers, I highly recommend using direct dials. So if you can get a hold of the person's mobile phone, or at least get their extension, LeadIQ and Apollo.io. Yeah, Yanir says, a big fan of LeadIQ. Yep, these are really great tools for getting direct dials. So part of being really productive when we're cold calling is making sure that we do the prep work, we do whatever our thing is to get in the zone, and then we bring data into the equation. Because if we got to call through an assistant, which I'm going to talk to you today about how to do, that's going to take longer, right, than getting a hold of the person directly. So with the assistants, and again, I want to remind you, I'm giving you a 10,000 foot view. So I'm going to give you kind of the bullet points of this, and we'll drill into these two areas, especially today. So I just want to give you kind of the bullet points here. So bottoms up, this is an approach that I use when I'm prospecting. So what's really good, and a couple of you people are mentioning ZoomInfo. I like ZoomInfo, it's just very expensive. Yeah, Anthony says very expensive batch, most expensive of the tools, which I agree with, Anthony. So with the assistants, if I can do a bottoms up approach, a lot of times what I'll do before prospecting into a VP of sales is I'll call the reps at the company. Yeah, especially reps that engage with my content, but even if they don't, I'll pick out a couple of reps and try to figure out what they're having problems with. And a lot of times what they'll say is, hey, well, we're trying cold calling, but it's not working, or we're sending emails, we're not getting responses, or we're getting objections we don't know how to handle. And then I can use that information that I get from an assistant or a below the line persona, and I can bring it up to the main point of contact. That's a really good strategy with assistants. The other big thing, and this sounds really obvious, is if you just ask those people for help. Hey, my name's Jason, I'm with Blissful Prospecting. I'm trying to get a hold of so-and-so. I just want to know if you might be able to help me out. If we ask for help, people are so much more likely to help us. So we're going to talk about how you can ask people for favors, essentially. And essentially, what we really want to do during this stage is gather intel. And again, I'll talk to you about what some of those things are. But assistants, I'm a really big fan of Smart Calling by Art Sobczak. And he believes that instead of calling them gatekeepers, we should call them assistants. We should humanize them. They are people, right? So we want to gather intel. Assistants are actually very knowledgeable about what's going on in the company. How can we work with them instead of going around them? All right, the next bridge here, we may or may not talk about voicemail today, depending on the time that we have, but typically when we talk to an assistant, most commonly what's going to happen is we're going to get the voicemail, right, to the main point of contact. And Mike says asking for help is a great strategy for entry to the gold mine. Exactly, Mike. So main point of contact, what we want to focus on is using some sort of permission-based opener, which I'll talk to you about today, what those are, what they sound like. We want to ask for permission at the top. We want to use a concept I call question stacking. So we want to have 2 or 3 smart questions that we can ask. And then we want to do something I call teach, don't take. So what can we share with the prospect that would be helpful for them? So instead of just asking, can I get 30 minutes of your time later so that we can talk about X, Y, Z? It's, hey, what do you think about chatting later? I'd love to share with you how we're helping other companies like A, B, and C solve problems that it sounds like you might be having, right? So how can we teach them something instead of simply taking their time? And then from there, it's about how do we rinse and repeat. So prep, how do we get good data? How do we work with assistants? Not against them, not around them, not over them. How do we work with them? what's the proper way to leave a voicemail, and then how do we engage the main point of contact. So before we move on, what I want to do is give you an idea of what we were going to talk about next. So I'm thinking, because a lot of you guys said that you wanted to talk about assistance, I figured that would be a good next place to go. So let me know if you feel otherwise. So I want to talk about the structure for if we call into the main office line here, how do we work with the assistant? All right. What is your guys', let me know in the chat. I want to check in with you real quick. What is your biggest challenge in talking to assistants? Yeah, and Lydia says, don't assume assistants aren't your real point of contact. Yep, definitely. I'm not the right person. The prospect is busy. They put me right to voicemail. What else? They hang up and say they're not interested. Best way to reach them is via email. They know it's a cold call. I'm not the right person. Just left the office. All great stuff. Okay, so we're talking about the right thing, it sounds like here. So the structure that I use when engaging assistants, and email me something, Jody, that's another really common one, right? So what we want to do is something like this. So the structure here is we have an intro, and then we also have in what I call insider info, or you can call it intel gathering. There's really two stages to this. So one approach that you can use when you're doing the intro, and you guys, by the way, you're giving me a lot of objections. We're going to get to objection handling towards the end. So I'll talk about how to handle those here in a second. We'll actually probably be here in about 20 minutes or so. So with our intro, there's two ways that we can approach this. One, we can go in with a really assumptive ask. So this is what I would recommend trying first. And this works for a lot of people. So what this might sound like is something like this. So if I know who I want to talk with, and I already have their name prepared, and the assistant answers, I'm just going to say something like this. Hey, this is Jason with Blissful Prospecting. I was calling for Todd. So if we can go in really assumptively like that and use the person's first name, even if they ask, well, Todd who? And then you could do Todd and then last name. Todd Capone, right? He's the name that came to mind for some reason. But the tone there is I'm not going to boss this person around. I'm just going to casually call in and go kind of assumptively and pretend like this person's not going to ask me any questions. And a lot of that you can get away with. And when I say get away with, I mean, it's a little bit easier for you to ask for the things that you want. Yeah, and John says, make it sound important like it's already an ongoing conversation. That's exactly kind of the approach here, right? John says the assumptive ask is great. What if you don't have a and trying to get one, a name and trying to get one? So that's a really good point too. So I'll get to that here in a second. So we can go in with the assumptive ask, hey, this is Jason with Blissful Prospecting. I was calling for Todd. That oftentimes works. Maybe half the time the person will send you through if you do that. And by the way, in the Q&A, I'm not going to get a chance to answer everyone's questions today. You can upvote the stuff that you really want to get to, and I may only get a chance to get to like maybe 2 or 3 questions. So let me know. All right, so assumptive ask, right? Are they expecting your call? Haley, I'll get to that objection here in a second. So the other way that we can approach this is by removing the surprise. I think one of the things that tends to happen when we talk to assistants is we feel like we have to hide who we are. So what we could do is we could go in and be really transparent. So we could take the opposite approach. So we could say something like this. Hey, Mary, this is Jason with Blissful Prospecting. I was calling to ask for Todd because I noticed that you guys are hiring a bunch of SDRs right now. And typically what I hear when you guys are hiring SDRs that a big focus is making sure they get ramped up quickly and they get off to a good start with their prospecting. So I was wondering if you could help me out, right? So that's the ask for help. I was wanting to know if you could help connect me with Todd, right? So I like this approach too, where I'm just going to be super transparent. So the structure that I'm using, so I don't know if you guys have looked at the reply method at all, but the structure of this is I'm going to start with empathy, and then I'm going to focus on sharing relevant results. So essentially what this means is that anytime I reach out to someone or ask to talk to someone, I'm going to say, I'm reaching out to talk to so-and-so because the empathy piece is a problem or something that I noticed that's going on with them right now. And above that is actually personalization. So this is the same format, by the way, that our cold emails follow, that our pitch is going to follow when we're making cold calls. So the personalization, I saw that you guys are hiring SDRs right now. One of the challenges that I hear with that is making sure they get ramped up quickly. One of the ways that we're helping is by doing this, right? Is through our boot camps, or I wanted to share some stuff I thought would be helpful for Todd based on work that we're doing with other companies, right? So I'm going to remove the surprise. I'm just going to be really straightforward with who I am, why I'm calling, who I'm asking for, etc. Oh, Paul's got a really interesting one too. He said, I ask if they manage Todd's calendar. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask for help, and we can do a bunch of different variations of that. But I also want to, before they do that, I want to take note of their name. So if they share their name or I can get their name, I can also reference that when I send an email to Todd. Or I can say, hey, Todd, I was just talking to John and he mentioned this, right? So take note of their name. And if you use the name with the person, there's just a lot more rapport there, right? So then we're going to ask for help. So the asking for help could be as simple as, hey, I just want to know if you might be able to help me out. And for some of you that don't know who you're asking for, you could do something like this. So you could say, oh, hey, John, my name's Jason. I'm with Blissful Prospecting. And I was giving you a call because I was on your guys' website, noticed that you guys were doing a really good job for your agency clients there, particularly the portfolio with ABC companies stuck out. And I was reaching out because one of the challenges that we hear with marketing agencies is that they're figuring out how to use those case studies and those portfolios to get new business, particularly through their sales department. And I wasn't really sure who to talk to about that. I did some digging on LinkedIn, but I figured you would probably know better than I. Who would even care about something like that? So I did the personalization, right? Here's what I found. Here's a problem that I hear. Here's how we're helping companies like you. And then I'm asking for help. Who would care about something like that? I don't like to ask who's in charge of that. It feels very salesy to me. Hey, is that something you might be able to help me out with? You just pause, let them answer. Hey, you probably know better than I would. Like, who would even care about something like that? Who would be the right person to talk with? So any variation of that works well. And you notice, you guys, with cold calling, I'm giving you some one-liners to use here, but really focus on the framework. It's more about the framework and using your words, not what you hear me say. So I'm just giving you some examples so you can hear the how-to part of it. So the next part that you can do here is like gathering this insider info. There's a lot of things that you can get from this person that you're talking to. So one, you could understand like, hey, I could gather some intel from the assistant around who's the right person to reach out to, who else would care about something like that. I can also confirm right phone, email, and then I can also confirm right timing. So if you're having trouble getting a hold of someone, you could ask, hey, is there anyone else that would be involved in that? Is there anyone else that would care about this? Is there anyone else that Todd works with that would care a lot about this? Are there any other departments that might care a lot about this? Like any variation of that, you guys pay attention to the tone really is important. I've heard, I can't remember who said this, so I can't give them credit, but the lost traveler tonality, the tonality you use when you're asking for directions, if you could use that same kind of tonality, like, oh, hey, I was curious, like, do you know who would be the right person to chat with about that would care about, if that was a problem or not? So we can also confirm right phone and email. So if someone's like, yeah, let me go ahead and transfer you, what I like to ask is, hey, I appreciate that. And before you do that, is there an extension or like a direct way to get a hold of Todd the next time I call? Or is there a better way to get a hold of him? Or do you know that, the best way to get a hold of Todd? So again, think about when you've had to ask for favors in your life and you're asking the person for help, and you got to let them opt in to that experience. So ask for help, get confirmation, then you can kind of go into these things. So right timing, are you aware of anything that's going on right now? Or have you heard anything around the company, around initiatives you guys have around this? So bottom line is like build a relationship. All right, there's one other technique I'm going to share with you. It's called the courtesy call technique. All right, so what you're going to do, this applies when you don't have a direct dial or a mobile for the main point of contact. So here's the situation. So let's say that you're sending emails to the VP or C-level person that you're trying to get a hold of, and you don't have a direct dial for them. So you don't have their cell phone, you don't have their extension, nothing like that, but you've sent them 3 or 4 emails and you can see that they're opening up your emails. So one technique, Jordan Greek, he actually was in one of our boot camps. This is a month or 2 ago. He came up with what he calls the courtesy call technique. And I want to share it with you guys. So it might sound something like this. Hey, John, yeah, my name's Jason with Blissful Prospecting. You know what, this might be like a really weird ask because I'm sort of calling you randomly and you don't know who I am, but I've been sending a lot of emails to Todd and I just noticed that he's been opening them a ton and I wanted to put in a courtesy call to see if there was a way to get a hold of him directly in case he might have some questions. Is that something you can help me out with? And most of the time, people will be willing to help you out. Now, they might not give you a cell phone number, but they might give you some advice on a better way to get a hold of him, or they might try to get a hold of him themselves, or they might put you through and at least get an extension so you can leave the person a direct voicemail. Yeah, Anthony says, will we receive a follow-up link post-meeting? Yeah, absolutely. You're going to get access to this recording. I'll send it out to everyone afterwards. But that courtesy call technique. So I'm just putting in a courtesy call and I need to acknowledge also, so this is where some empathy takes place. Hey, I just, this might be kind of weird because you're getting a call randomly from me and you don't know who I am, but I was hoping you might be able to help me out. I was putting in a courtesy call to see if Todd had any questions because I've sent him a few emails. I just have noticed that he's just been opening them a ton. Is that something you can help me out with? And in that tone, again, is that something you could help out with? Usually people are pretty open to helping you out. They want to help. Assistants want to help. Cool. I want to pause here before we move to the next part. What's your biggest takeaway so far? What is something actionable for you that you can use the next time you go to engage an assistant? Let me know in the chat. What's something actionable that you've gotten so far? Yeah, Yanri says, a framework, asking for help, Mackie says, tone. Yeah, tone's a big one. Ask for help. Just ask for help. Yep, tonality, Jeff says, ask for help. Another thing that I've used that works pretty well too is you could do kind of a variation of this where person picks up and you say, hey, this is Jason. I was on your website doing some research. And I was wondering if you might be able to help me out with something real quick. And the person will usually be like, oh, yeah, what's going on? So you could be kind of vague also and ask for help. And then I want to remove the surprise. My name is so-and-so again. I'm with so-and-so company. I'm looking to reach out to this person for this reason. So remove the surprise, right? And I can go in and say, hey, I was doing some research because they don't know if you're a client. They don't know who you are when you call in. So you don't want to sound like a salesperson. Don't be salesy. This is not the opportunity to do that. Cool, awesome, you guys. I'm gonna keep moving. All right, so here's what you might have been waiting for. Here is, how do we structure a cold call for target contacts? So this is, I got the decision maker on the phone and they said hello. My heart starts racing. What do I say next? How do I introduce myself during the call? So there's 3 parts to this. So there's an intro, there is a hook, and then there is a close. So when we're introducing the call, the big thing that we want to do right off the bat, no exceptions, we need to do this every time, is we need to remove the surprise again. This is Jason with Blissful Prospecting. Some people are like, oh, you should use first and last name. I haven't really found a difference between the two, but you need to introduce yourself right off the top. Prospect says, hello, this is Jason with Blissful Prospecting. Now what we need to use is a permission-based opener. So one of the things that I normally, when I'm doing a training with a company, is I kind of talk about a lot of the psychology behind this stuff. And the psychology behind a permission-based opener is autonomy. I don't know about you, but I hate when people tell me that I have to do something, or I hate being a part of an experience where I don't have a choice, where I don't get to opt in to that experience. So when you're cold calling, yep, I'm going to give you some examples, Rob. Hold on just a second, man. I'm going to give you a lot of examples. And I'm going to also talk to you about how you can make your own permission-based openers. With autonomy, we want to allow the prospect to opt into this experience. So with call reluctance, oftentimes what we think is that we are an interruption. So you as an individual are not a nuisance. You're not an interruption if you have something valuable to share with them and you do it the right way. But we have to acknowledge that they didn't ask you to call them. So you are interrupting them. There's a difference between interrupting someone and being a nuisance. Those are two totally different things. Okay, so with the permission-based opener, there's 3 parts to a permission-based opener. So there is, I need to empathize. So I need to talk to their situation real quick. I give a amount of time that I would like, and then I ask permission. So the most common one, if you've heard these before, Sandler talks to, and they call them upfront contracts. But the famous one with Sandler that you've probably heard is, hey, I know I probably caught you in the middle of something. Empathize, right? I'm acknowledging what they're probably in the middle of since they picked up the phone. But do you have 30 seconds? I could tell you why I'm calling. Time. And then you could let me know if you want to keep chatting. 8 or 9 times out of 10, that works. 8 or 9 times out of 10, they'll say, yeah, you got 30 seconds, right? Yeah, Rob says he's a longtime Sandler follower. So that is a variation that you can use. I like that one. It works pretty well, but I recommend making one that feels comfortable to you. So with the empathize, you could say, hey, I caught you in the middle of something. Or you could say, hey, I know I'm calling you out of the blue here. That's one I like to use. Hey, I know I'm catching you out of the blue here and you're probably in the middle of something. But I was wondering if you had a minute, I could tell you why I'm calling, and then you could let me know if you want to keep chatting. Yeah, so when you ask for time, it gives them an opening to say no. And guess what? It actually has the opposite effect of what you would think. When you allow people to say yes or no, people are actually more inclined to opt into that experience if they have a choice. So empathize plus time plus permission. So other variations of this that I like is you can be a little bit more in the moment. So you could say something like, hey, I know it's Monday morning. You probably got a ton of meetings planned the rest of the day. So I'll make this quick, empathize. I was wondering if you had about 30 seconds. I could tell you why I'm calling, and then you could let me know if you want to keep chatting. Does that sound fair? Brandon says, do you add personalization to your intro? I don't. Not at that intro right there. That doesn't mean it's a bad idea, though. So you could say something like, hey, I know I probably caught you in the middle of something, but I was doing some research on you and what you're doing at ABC Company. And I was wondering, do you have a minute? I could tell you why I'm calling, and you can let me know if you want to keep chatting. So that's something that you could do, Brendan. When I call people on Friday afternoons, for example, I might say, hey, I know it's Friday afternoon. You probably got a lot more fun things planned than taking a cold call. But I was wondering if you had 60 seconds, I could tell you why I'm calling, and then you could let me know if you want to keep chatting. So 60 seconds, 30 seconds. Some people use 27 seconds. I mean, it doesn't really matter what number you pick. I like to use a minute, right? So empathize, time plus permission. Another one that you can use that's pretty cool. Yeah, so Anthony says, one of our guys uses this and it works like a charm. Hey, Dame, gonna be honest, this is a cold call. Yeah, I love that one too. That was the very next thing I was gonna say, is something along the lines of, hey, Anthony, this is a cold call. I know you probably weren't expecting this, but I was wondering, do you got 30 seconds for me to tell you why I'm calling? Then you can let me know if you want to keep chatting or if you want to hang up. Or you can have a little bit of fun with it too. Another one that I've heard that Adam Beaton over at LinkedIn uses is, hey, I was giving you a call and I wanted to know if I could make your day with a cold call if you got 30 seconds, right? So you could do something like that and have a little bit of fun. So that's your permission-based opener. And we'll get to objections here in a second. So you guys are asking a lot of questions around how to handle the objection. I'm going to get to that next, actually, depending on what we have. Yeah, I'm going to get to that next. So permission-based opener, and then what I like to use after that is the reply method structure. So we already talked about this, right? That's the personalization. I saw this thing on your LinkedIn profile, on your website. I saw this piece of news. Here's a problem that I hear people like you have, or I imagine this is what you're focused on right now. And here's how we can help. So person says, yeah, you got 30 seconds. Hey, great. Well, I was on your LinkedIn and I saw this. Typically what I hear is that people like you have problems like this. And I was calling to share with you how we're helping other companies like yours solve for that problem. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm either going to do one of two things. This is a personal preference. You can either ask for the meeting or you can ask for permission. So I get my 30-second little blurb. I saw this thing. Here's a problem that people like you were having. I was calling to share with you how we're helping other companies with that. So I can ask for the meeting. I know I caught you probably in the middle of something here, but do you have some time later, tomorrow or the next day where we could dig into it a little bit more? Some people like asking for the meeting right there. I don't personally like that. I like asking for permission again. So I'll say, hey, do you have 1 or 2 minutes? I'd love to ask you like 2 or 3 questions just to see if this is something that would even be relevant for you. And then you can let me know if you want to keep talking. Fair? Cool. And then I go into this concept I call question stacking. This is something, I'm just looking at the time. We don't have a ton of time to dig into question stacking, but question stacking, essentially what we're doing here is how can we stack context into the question? So I'll give you a really quick example. So I was working with a company that sold like automated bookkeeping solutions for small businesses. So one of the things they needed to know off the top is this customer using QuickBooks or Xero for their accounting software? So if I say, hey, can I ask you a couple of questions, see if this is relevant? And the prospect says yes. And I go, well, are you using QuickBooks or Xero? That sounds like a qualification question to me, right? As a prospect, I feel like I'm being qualified. And I don't like that feeling as a prospect. I don't know you, you're calling me randomly, it's a cold call. Like, I don't want to feel like you're qualifying me. So if I can add some context into that question and say something like, hey, most of the business owners that I talk to, are they using QuickBooks or Xero, or maybe they're using spreadsheets or something like that to track their bookkeeping. I'm curious, what are you guys doing? That's a completely different way to ask that question. So the context could be around a tool. Okay, Chris, context, what is your username and password? We don't need to ask people for their usernames and passwords, but the other piece of context might be a problem. So for me, it's cold calling and call reluctance is a lot of times what I'm coming in and helping companies with. Hey, and I'm really curious, because a lot of companies do a combination of calling and emailing and that sort of thing. But with calling in particular, what I hear is that call reluctance could be an issue. Is that something that you guys run across ever? Or I'm curious, like, how does your team deal when it comes to call reluctance? I can stack context into that question and then I can ask it. The last part of this that I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize. I'm going to summarize what I heard, and then I'm going to go into the close. The close, I want to get agreement on next steps. I want to schedule time. And then I want to confirm. So once you've asked a couple questions, you're taking notes, you're going to summarize that back to the prospect. You say, awesome. So what I heard today is that call reluctance is kind of an issue, and that you were really hoping that your reps would make more cold calls, but really that they would get better response rates out of their emails as well when they're prospecting. Does all of that sound fair so far? Does that sound good? Or, hey, did I do a good job summarizing that? I'm going to get agreement. Awesome. To schedule time, I'm going to say, do you have your calendar handy? I'm going to wait for them to pick out their calendars, say yes, whatever it is. And like, hey, I want to know if we could schedule some time. I'd love to share with you how other companies that we're working with are helping with call reluctance, helping overcome call reluctance so the reps pick up their phone more, and how they're getting better response rates from their emails. And then I'm going to schedule a time with them. So Anthony says, may not have time for this. How do you pick which value prop to go for? We help in a number of ways. It can be tough to pick one area to dig into. So you're going to have to pick the one that's most common. And you may or may not miss the mark. And you may or may not want to be a little bit more vague. If you're selling something that's like a ton of different solutions, you may be little bit more vague here, like, that we help companies with this kind of, you're running into these kind of problems, A, B, or C. I'm really curious. The permission could be, hey, I'm really curious. Are any of those problems something that you're running into right now? Is any of that top of mind for you right now? Is any of that something you've been thinking about? Or hey, is it cool if I ask you a few questions to see if any of that might be relevant for you? And then you can kind of pick which one to dig into here. And then to confirm, you want to, on the call, you want the prospect to confirm that they got the calendar invite. So you want them to accept the calendar invite on the phone. So they need to accept invite, and then you're just gonna go over the agenda of the call. So we're gonna talk about the problems that you mentioned earlier. I'm gonna talk about how some other companies are solving for that. And I'll send you a meeting link so you have it, etc. So this is how we structure targeting our decision makers or our target contacts. Real quick, before we move to objection handling, then we got to move here pretty quick, is what was your biggest takeaway? Share with me in the chat. What was most actionable for you here? The structure for calling targeted contacts. What was most actionable? What was your biggest takeaway from this? Let me know in the chat. And then we're going to go to objection handling real quick. Timothy likes question stacking, context with question. Yeah, autonomy is really big. Yeah, context, question stacking. Awesome. Yeah, summarizing what they said, Janine says. Awesome. You guys are awesome. Cool. Thank you. All right, let's real quick go into this. So we got about 5 or 6 minutes here. So the last thing, I know I'm just like barraging you guys with content right now. So I hope you're getting some value here. I want to walk you through what I call the EVO framework. So this is how to handle objections using empathy. I think the biggest thing that's wrong with most of the ways that we handle objections is we go straight into the last step first. You go straight into offering. So prospect says, I don't have time. So what we say is, well, it'll only take me 30 seconds for you to tell you why I'm calling. And then you can decide if you want to keep chatting. Or prospect says, we already have a vendor. Well, I already know you have a vendor, but wouldn't it be great to talk to me as well so that we can compare solutions? Or, hey, I know you said you're not interested, but you haven't even heard what I said. We go into offer mode first about what we want from the prospect. What we need to do is the exact opposite. We need to actually do 2 things first. We need to empathize. So we need to acknowledge the prospect first. And then we need to validate. No different than you and your spouse get in an argument because you didn't do something that you said that you were going to do, right? So let's say that my wife, Sarah, told me to take out the trash yesterday and forgot to do it, and she gets on me about it today. The way that I could disarm that situation is by saying something like this. Hey, so this is how you're going to start this phrase. Sounds like, hey, sounds like you're pretty frustrated with the fact that I didn't follow through and do the thing that I said I was going to do. Validate. Can totally understand. Can totally understand why something like that would piss you off, right? That's going to disarm the person. If I can talk to how I think they might be feeling or what might be going on in their head, and then I validate and let them know it's okay that they feel that, then I can go into an offer for next steps. So there's lots of different variations of this that you can use. I like to use, would it be a bad idea? ... So let's talk about a couple of examples. So there's some objections, and let me know, in the chat, just throw some objections in there that you get, and we can kind of go through the most basic ones. I would say that the most common one that you're going to get in a cold call is probably more of a shallow objection. So Vivek says, where did you get my personal cell contact information from? Let's use that as an objection. So this is in the Q&A that I'm looking at. So someone says, hey, how did you get my cell phone? Why are you calling me on my personal cell phone? Whatever it might be. I'm going to empathize. So I'm going to think, what is going on in that person's head? If I got a call from someone on my cell phone and I didn't give out my cell phone number, what would I be thinking? I'd be thinking, well, how the hell did this person get my cell phone? And why the heck are they calling me on my line? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to address that when we're objection handling. So we might say something like this. So prospect says, hey, well, actually, where did you get my cell and contact information? Hey, great question. Sounds like you're a little bit curious with how I might have gotten your number, which is totally reasonable. I can totally understand where you might be coming from because I'm calling you out of the blue here. And then I would explain real quick, I'd add this piece in, right, to help the prospect understand. I was actually doing some research on you, and I use a tool called Lead IQ to find the contact information for my prospects. But hey, while I have you, would it be a bad idea if I spent 30 seconds telling you what the reason why I'm calling, and then you can let me know if you want to keep chatting? So I'm going to empathize. Hey, sounds like you're wondering where I might have gotten your phone because you didn't exactly reach out to me asking for me to call you. Which, if that's the case, I can totally understand where you're coming from. I use a tool called Lead IQ, and what I was wondering is, would it be a bad idea if I just took a couple seconds here to tell you why I'm calling? Then you can let me know if you want to keep chatting. So someone says not interested. When someone says not interested, typically that's a brush off because of another reason, right? Might have caught you in the middle of something, whatever it might be, right? So what you're going to do in that case is, hey, sounds like I caught you in the middle of something. And if that's the case, I could totally understand why taking a call from you might not be the best way to spend your time, or it might not be the best way, or might be something that you were unexpecting, right? Sounds like I caught you in the middle of something. Sounds like I might have caught you in the middle of doing something, right? Sounds like you're pretty busy right now. And if that's the case, I can totally understand why taking a call from someone like me, someone that you don't know, would not be at the top of your list. But hey, would it be a bad idea if I took about 30 seconds? I could tell you why I'm calling. You can let me know if you want to keep chatting. Yeah, so would it be a bad idea, Paul? The reason why we're doing that is we're really going for no with that question, right? We want to ask a question where it's okay for them to say no instead of getting a yes for them. Yeah, okay. So I want to get to this last part of the call. You guys, we're out of time. And what you can do is I'm going to send the replay out to you afterwards so that you can check it out. But I wanted to share something with you real quick about the boot camp. And this is the point in the call right now where I'm going to talk about our boot camp program. If you don't want to hear that, I don't want to like pitch you right now. So let me know. You can just hop off the call right now. You'll get a recording later. If you don't want to hear about the boot camp, not going to hurt my feelings. Just drop off the call and I'll wait just a minute for you guys to do that. Let me know. Totally drop off the call if it's not something that you want to hear about. Like I said, I don't want to spend the next 5 minutes telling you about something you're not interested in or don't want to hear about. So totally feel free to drop off. I'll give you guys a couple seconds and then we'll get into sharing. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. Yeah, you bet. Got a lot of thank yous in there. You bet, you guys. Okay, so the boot camp. So I'm going to share a link with you here. So essentially the reason why, there we go. The reason why we started these boot camps is there were a lot of individual reps reaching out to us after COVID wanting help. And their company wasn't willing to hire someone like me to come in and help them. And they didn't really find good courses or whatever else it might be out there. And they wanted help with their prospecting. So one of the things that we started was a 6-week boot camp to help teach some of those tactics. And these are some of the companies that we've worked with. And I gave you the link in the chat. But we're actually going to be starting next week, and the deadline to enroll is this Friday. And you can check out and see, hey, if you're a good fit or not. But essentially, if you're full-time prospecting and you're making cold calls, you're sending cold emails, et cetera, this likely would be a good fit for you. And here's what we're going to be covering. So in those 6 weeks, what we talk about first is like, how can we identify good fit opportunities? So how can we empathize more with our prospects, know their language, right? How do we know where they're heading, et cetera? In week number 2, we talk all about crafting a great message. So if you want to know how to write better cold emails, that's something that we talk about as well. So we're going to walk you through the reply method framework. You're going to get some help on how to craft really good messaging, how to find triggers. We're going to talk about personalization at scale. Week 3, we talk all about sequencing. So if you're wanting to know the best tips and greatest best practices for how many times I should reach out to a prospect before giving up, what combination of email and phone calls should I use, et cetera, that's covered in week 3. And then week 4, we do a much more in-depth coaching call around this topic right now. And let me know, you guys, as I'm explaining this, if you have any questions in the chat. But we do a whole week on cold calling. So we'll do more in-depth what we talked about today. And you're actually going to get a talk track like this. So we'll build a talk track out so you guys know how to leave voicemails, you know what to say over the phone. We help you come up with those compelling questions and those question stacking that we talked about. We have a whole week on objection handling, a whole week on how to scale, et cetera. Sarah says, is this relevant for business development teams for professional services? Absolutely. So if you're selling software, this is great. If you're selling professional services, so you work for a consulting firm, whatever it might be, that's great. So there's on-demand content. So this is the way that it works. So you get access to a course that looks like this. You get lifetime access, actually. And here is the course. So all 6 weeks, there's tons of lessons in here. So you get lifetime access to this. Bunch of in-depth lessons, worksheets, all of this. So Stephen says, is this the one-on-one work to customize to my space? How do you help us get the message right? So you work with the course here. So there's some work on your own. And then you also get live group coaching. So typically the groups are around 15 to 20 people each. So, and we do a one-on-one call too. So you get 6 weekly group coaching calls, 90 minutes. They're pretty small groups usually, somewhere between 15 and 20 people. Some of them are 5 to 10 people. Some of them are a little bit smaller. And then you get a one-on-one session with me as well. And then on this page, there's links here if you want to see us in action. There's case studies. And then here's the pricing. So the one-time option is $999, or we have a payment plan here as well. And oftentimes people's companies and stuff will help chip in for this too. So that's the pricing. That's how the program works. We're about out of time. Is there any other questions I can help you with before we take off in the chat? Stephen, to answer your question, you will get a one-on-one with me to help you. And then those group calls will help you with your messaging as well. And then everything, there's frequently asked questions. There's the schedule of the calls, like all of this stuff is in here. And if you feel like you're a good fit, would love to see you there. And if this is not a good fit for you at this time, this is all good too. You know, I'm glad that you were able to get some value, you know, from this meeting, hopefully. And then I have tons of free content. So make sure you're on our email list, you follow me on LinkedIn, et cetera. There's tons of free stuff there. Cool. Yep. I'll send over the recording to you guys later today. I wanted to give you guys this link so that you have it. We'll send something out about it later today. And I appreciate you guys so much for being on the call, and the participation was awesome. We had 300 people on the call today, which is pretty good for kind of a last minute webinar announcement. So thank you guys. Thank you for the kind words, and we'll talk to you soon. You'll get an email from me later today.